Do you recognize the Geneva Conventions as applying?
I've answered your question.
No, you haven't. You've evaded it, and your colleague deceitfully responded to it. Do you recognize the Geneva Conventions? It's a simple question.
Go ahead.
Do you recognize the Geneva Conventions as applying to Gaza?
When you interrupt me, it's not.
I'm not interrupting you. I'm asking for a simple question, a simple answer to a simple question.
Go ahead.
Do the Geneva Conventions apply to Gaza or not? They apply to everywhere on the planet except for the Palestinians. Isn't that right? Isn't that U.S. policy?
We continue to stress everywhere that
Do the Geneva Conventions apply?
Needs to be abided by and respected.
Do the Geneva Conventions apply? You're deceiving the American public.
Against Iran, I'd like to ask about the sanctions against Iran.
Yeah.
Just broadly speaking.
I sent our exchange from Monday around to a series of international lawyers. I don't know if you're familiar with Richard Falk. He's a very prominent international lawyer, taught at Princeton for years, was the UN rapporteur. He emailed back to me, Gaza remains, from the perspective of international law and the UN, an occupied Palestine territory subject to the Fourth Geneva Convention. I don't believe that Israel recognizes the Fourth Geneva Convention for all of these decades. I don't know what U.S. policy is on that question. So that's one question. Does the U.S. recognize the Geneva Conventions as applying to Palestinian territories?
Sam, what I'm just going to say is what you've heard us say before is that we believe
in that. I'm asking a specific question.
That's the answer that I have for you, which is that we believe wholeheartedly that Israel has every right to defend itself and to defend its security, and what happened on October 7th would be unacceptable to any country, and steps must and should be taken. Steps must and should be taken to ensure that those events cannot be repeated. Now, I've taken three of your questions. I'm going to work
one
the room.
country attacking another. We're talking.
Thank you.
Thanks, I have two topics, but before we dive into
I'm going to pick up where I left off yesterday. Does the U.S. recognize the Fourth Geneva Convention as applying to Gaza and the West Bank?
Sam, I'm not going to get into the specifics of the legal aspects of this. I would have to double check for you.
It has been long-standing U.S. policy that the Fourth Geneva Convention does apply. Indeed, if the Fourth Geneva Convention doesn't apply, it's not clear to me what legal constraints there are on Israel. The Hansel memo was issued by Cyrus Vance when he was Secretary of State. That was U.S. policy. That's been U.S. policy. Pompeo seems to have said, we're not going to abide by this. Has this State Department, has the Biden-Blinken State Department effectively abrogated decades of U.S. policy and adopted the Pompeo policy on this question?
I'm not sure what you're referring to, but
okay. The Hansel memo is.
I understand what the Hansel memo is, but
you
I'm
do.
asking
Okay.
what your question.
Does it still apply? Does this State Department still abide by the Hansel memo?
We have had no change in policy as it relates to the Hansel memo, which is something that Matt has spoken to a number of months ago as well. But let me just reiterate, Sam, that this we have. From the forefront of this conflict, we have talked about very clearly the need for ensuring that this military operation is conducted in accordance with international law. That's something we continue to talk about.
You won't say that you abide
by that today.
But which law? Which law? The Fourth Geneva Convention or not?
Go ahead, Alex.
Which law? It's a free fire zone if you're not going to abide by the Fourth Geneva Convention. Which law? You're creating the legal construct.
Sam, we've taken two. If you're going to interrupt your colleagues, I'm going to ask you to leave.
No, I'm interrupting you.
The rest of the room has questions that they would like to get to.
I'm sure they do,
I've taken your question every day of this week.
Thank you.
Alex, please go ahead.
I just haven't gotten an answer.
Please go ahead, Alex.
I want to push on the corridor issue.
Sure.
Can I get a yes or no as to whether or not the U.S. accepts the Geneva Conventions as applying to the occupied Palestinian territories?
We, of course, accept the Geneva Conventions. Go ahead.
Okay, I wasn't able to get that before. Thank you. So, just a follow-up on the, when you said yesterday that the Geneva Convention, you recognized the Geneva Conventions, you meant with respect to the Israeli-occupied territory.
I meant exactly what I said.
But you didn't say the occupied territories.
Exactly what I said.
So you don't recognize it with respect to the
The briefing ended about 30 seconds.
But I didn't get called on again.
Yeah.
Euromed Monitor, Human Rights Monitor, reports that Israel is using drones to lure residents and then shoot them.
I've not seen that report, Sam, so I'm not going to comment on it. At every conversation that we have with our partners in Israel, we continue to stress the moral and strategic imperative that they have to work on deconfliction mechanisms and to ensure that civilian harm is minimized in every which way possible. And we'll continue to stress that every way we can.
Will you
Go
look
ahead.
at this report?
I am sure we'll look at this report, Sam. I don't have any comment on it right now.
Do you
Go ahead.
recognize the Geneva Conventions as applying?
I've
to
answered
residents?
your question, Sam.
No, you
Go
haven't.
ahead.
You've evaded it, and your colleague deceitfully responded to it. Do you
Go
recognize the
ahead.
Geneva Conventions? It's a simple question.
Go ahead.
Do you recognize the Geneva Conventions as applying to Gaza?
When you interrupt me, it's not.
I'm not
a matter
interrupting
of,
you. I'm
not
asking
gonna
for a simple
take
question, a
additional
simple answer
questions.
to a simple question.
Go ahead. You got two questions.
It's totally No, I didn't get two questions.
You did. You asked.
No.
You
I
asked a question about your report, and you
told me
asked
you
a
didn't have any
follow-up.
information.
Please
I
go
asked
ahead.
another, and you're refusing to answer it.
Go ahead,
Do
sir.
the Geneva Conventions apply to Gaza or not? They
Go.
apply to everywhere on the planet except for the Palestinians. Isn't that right? Isn't
We
that U.S.
continue to
policy?
stress everywhere that
Do the
international
Geneva Conventions
humanitarian law
apply?
needs to be abided by and respected. Go
Do
ahead.
the Geneva Conventions apply?
You are now interrupting your colleague. Go
No,
ahead.
I'm interrupting you. I'm not
Go ahead.
interrupting you. I'm insisting on an answer to a critical question.
Go ahead.
I'd like to ask.
So you're
about the
deceiving the American
sanctions
public.
against Iran. I'd like to ask about the sanctions against Iran.
Yeah.
Just broadly speaking,